Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So Howie in for Real Britain, Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. This is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. There's lots to come on the show this afternoon. We'll be getting your thoughts on police officers wearing rainbow-coloured helmets. And it seems like football fans invading the pitch are becoming more regular and possibly, folks, more dangerous. We'll have a campus clash segment where two students are going to debate whether universities should positively discriminate to achieve equality. But first, it's the news with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray over the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule-breaking parties while it was being drafted. Labour's Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says people deserve to know the truth. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt told GB News he wouldn't have had lockdowns in the first place.
Would I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have because of my experience as Health Secretary, but I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history, which could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies are voting on action over pay. Crisis talks are underway to try and keep passenger and freight trains running if it goes ahead. Supply chain expert and the owner of Export Unlocked, Richard Bartlett, told GB News It's bad news for the consumer.
Supply chain for the consumer is everything. The whole chain is working. If that chain's not working, or there's a delay, or there's extra costs, there's delays at ports, there's delays everywhere else, it has a huge effect because these are normally ordered within a period of time. They're not ordered tomorrow for next week. They're ordered in advance. And if that advance rule of 3 months starts to slow down, it has a huge effect. And we're certainly seeing that. We're certainly seeing price increases. There's no question about that.
Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith has called for benefits to be boosted in line with inflation to shield against mounting costs of living. He said rebates and discretionary funds represent a step in the wrong direction for tackling poverty. The government is already handing out £150 council tax rebates for many homes and will take £200 off energy bills from October. Gavin Rice from the Centre for Social Justice think tank told GB News the government should also boost universal credit.
We're suggesting is something that's a bit more modest, which is just you increase universal credit in line with the rising cost of living. That would be less expensive than the £20 uplift. It would not be, as it were, an absolute increase to generosity, but it would just ensure that the very poorest in our society have got enough coming in that they can cover these extraordinary rises in the cost of electricity and gas.
Police chiefs are planning to apologise over allegations of racism and discrimination within their ranks. In a report by the Police Chiefs Council due to be published next week, leaders will commit to being institutionally anti-racist. The report highlights how powers are being disproportionately applied to black people, and it admits that having only 2 black officers reach Chief Constable or Assistant Commissioner rank in policing's history is a huge failure. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the southern port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. It's now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as its forces press for control of Ukraine's Donbass region. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has declared a travel ban on 963 Americans, including President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and CIA Chief William Burns. And the Foreign Secretary will meet with a top Democrat leader over government plans to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It follows the US House Speaker's warning that Congress won't support a free trade deal with the UK if it discards the post-Brexit trade agreement. Former Conservative MP Michael Brown told GB News that Democrats are appealing to Irish American voters ahead of the midterm elections.
I think this is just straightforward electioneering inside the Democratic Party from the point of view of Pelosi and her Democrat colleagues who are facing a very difficult fight in November. Secondly, bluntly, we've been here many times before, Paul. The fact is, Nancy Pelosi is bullying the British government. It will have to be solved. I think most people in the EU acknowledge that it is very unfair on the people of Northern Ireland.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, let's get back to Darren Grimes.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on the show. We'll be giving you my take on political policing, wearing rainbow hats on patrol, officers working from home, and the Met spending nearly £500,000 probing so-called Partygate. When will our excellent officers be allowed to get on with what they're good at? Tackling genuine crime. The Football Association, police and multiple football clubs are now cooperating for the final set of fixtures this weekend to battle the recent rise in pitch invasions. Sheffield United player Billy Sharp was headbutted by a rival fan, and Merseyside police are investigating Crystal Palace manager Patrick Vieira after his scuffle with an Everton pitch invader caught on camera. So how do we actually tackle that, which could ultimately end up being quite dangerous indeed? Now, a huge majority of us would be happy to see minority ethnic Prime Minister, with a poll showing 84% are in favour. Wouldn't be bothered, folks. I think this is great news to see, and hopefully we can reach 100% soon, because ultimately, who cares? That's what we're talking about for the next hour. I'd love to know your thoughts, though, as ever, on our police force, folks. How do you feel about seeing an officer wearing a rainbow-coloured helmet? You can tweet me at GB News, or you can email me on gbviews@gbnews.com. Watch us online on YouTube and don't forget about Facebook. Loads of brilliant content on our GB News page. Cheers very much. Now, on that topic of policing, it was one of the most striking and infuriating images of the week. Police Superintendent James Sutherland, patrolling around his patch of Cambridgeshire, wearing a garish rainbow helmet in the name of International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia. This, folks, it got me thinking. I wonder when the cops will have a national day of actually investigating crime instead of virtue signalling for the Internet Day. One to think about. The image seemed to sum up a couple of bad weeks for British cops, a week in which they have pulled in every direction by fashionable politics of the day and away from what I think they're actually good at, which is tackling real crime. Numerous forces have rolled out trendy so-called modern workplace policies. The Telegraph reported yesterday, allowing cops to investigate rapes and murders at home. I mean, really? We also learned that promising not to investigate historic lockdown breaches, the Met have spent a whopping £460,000 probing Partygate. Meanwhile, a lady who nudged an Extinction Rebellion protester who was laying in front of a car, preventing her from getting a child to school, criticised the police for double standards after she received a fine and a driving ban. I've no doubt that they were pretty soft on what happened to the Extinction Rebellion protester that was blocking the road, though. She said it's the police that have pushed this. They're really going for this. And she's a working mum, Sherilyn Speed. She added that she thinks it's double standards and that drivers who were delayed by the protests all called the police and they didn't come. I think she's got a point here, right? Instead of doing the work of eco-extremists, of Black Lives Matter or the LGBT lobby, a police officer should be able to do the job of a police officer. Novel idea, I know. How many of us have been utterly perplexed by the sight of these clown-like patrol cars, embellished in the colours of the rainbow, to raise awareness for the LGBT community that purport to give confidence to our LGBT plus community, whatever that is, and other underrepresented groups. Or we've seen cops dancing with Extinction Rebellion as they block roads, or kneeling even with BLM lockdown breaches. I tell you what would give confidence to every taxpayer in Britain. The police being able to do their jobs in a police station, not at home, serving all of the British public, be that gay, straight, black, white, trans, whatever. BLM, Extinction Rebellion, and members of the LGBTQ plus clad, rainbow clad, alphabet soup, whatever they call themselves these days, not at their own houses at risk of burglary, right? Investigate genuine crime. Do these people not own cars? Do they not hold mobile phones? If so, I'm pretty sure that just like everybody else, they wish the police were able to investigate actual crimes, like robberies and burglaries and all of these other important things. Because, folks, Home Office data released last month shows us that a tiny 4.2% of theft offences and 6.6% of robberies resulted in a charge. I've heard time and again that the police say there's naught we can do. Nothing to see here, folks. In fact, a record low of just 5.8% of crimes are ultimately getting solved. But don't worry, folks, right? At least the police are decorating their helmets and writing lovely Twitter-friendly messages on their motors, while some wrong'un is nicking the stuff that you worked hard to buy yourself. And look, I'm a big supporter of the bobbies on the beat. They work hard, they're paid too little, and sometimes they're asked to do too much with precious little in the way of protection. But I'm afraid that this focus on minority groups, tackling offensive speech online and recording these non-crime hate incidents that go hand in hand with adopting the rainbow into everyday policing, they all ultimately end up transforming policing into an office job. Even folks into a working from home job. Now, I'm one of those with a non-crime hate incident against my name for cause and offence online. Some police officer, instead of investigating an actual crime, will have been left recording my non-crime for offending somebody on Twitter. If you ask me, it is utterly cartoon. It is taking the Michael out of the taxpayer. But maybe, just maybe, the upper echelons of our police force are starting to get the message. Her Majesty's new Chief Inspector of Constabulary has said last week that our cops are not the thought police. His words, not mine. And they should actually focus on dealing with actual offences and keeping the public safe. Again, his words, not mine. Andy Cook told the Times, we follow legislation and we follow the law. Simple as that. Policing is busy enough dealing with the serious offences that are going on. Busy enough trying to keep people safe. Hear, hear, Andy, music to my ears, I tell you. But actions speak louder than words. It's time for real change in British policing. The police ought to be told that identity politics isn't for them. Why, oh why, would any hardened criminal take British policing seriously when their priorities are to paint anything they can in rainbow colours? What's next? Handcuffs with the trans flag? We don't allow the armed forces to ramble about the world draped in rainbow colours like an armed-to-the-teeth clown. Why should our police force be any different? It's an embarrassment. Let's get our bobbies on the beat, back on our streets, off of our tweets, and delete the police's politicised retreat. Now, more on that, folks. Cambridgeshire police were criticised after sharing pictures of Superintendent James Sutherland wearing the brightly coloured helmet while patrolling Cambridge this week. On Monday, they said, today is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia, and Superintendent James Sutherland was pictured wearing that rainbow helmet on patrol around Cambridge. But as I argued at the top of the show there, shouldn't our police be apolitical? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss this is former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police, Kevin Hurley. Kevin, thank you very much for your company.
Pleasure.
Can I ask you, Kevin, did you agree with what I said there at the start of the show?
I absolutely thought you were talking for what most of the public think and most of the police officers think. Frankly, the police has embraced wokeism far too much and it pervades everything. I've just come from lunch with a serving detective on a specialist squad who tells me that he's scared to death of opening his mouth and saying the wrong word in the office in case he offends someone. And we see that replicated right across the piece in everything we see in policing. That helmet is an absolute classic. First off, let me make the point. So everybody is entitled to their own position on whether or not they are LGBT plus or whatever. Let everybody be whatever they want. However, as you say, the role of the police is to be apolitical. So I'll just stay with the rainbow motifs at the moment. Whilst it's fine in one way for police to say, yes, we're supportive of the LGBT community, if you're wearing a particular logo that another group finds offensive against their religious beliefs, what you're actually doing for that other group is offending them.
Yeah.
And you're showing, if you like, preference the other way. So my view on this, and it always has been, because I've always been a stickler for standards of turnout, which have got steadily worse in the police, that police officers should not wear any motif, any badge whatsoever, other than at Poppy Day at the end of June, early November.
But because some, especially on the left, might argue, mightn't they, that the poppy is also a political act?
Well, they may do, but the poppy is standard, if you like, Commonwealth culture. Actually, it's not British. Commonwealth culture, and it's a recognition of all the people who gave their lives serving the Queen abroad. That's actually what they did. And because we are, in fact, a sovereign country where the Queen is the head of state, that's what the symbol is, people who gave their lives in the ultimate sacrifice. So it's not really a political statement because that's what it's about. But I think the other issues are, there are, for example, police officers will wear Union Jacks with a thin blue line on their uniform. I'm opposed to that, and that will upset thousands of police officers because what they're doing is they're making a political statement that we are embattled and beleaguered, and some of our officers are getting, if you like, fewer and far between, and some have died on duty. It's not the role of a police officer in any way to make a political statement with an emblem on that. Far better they get on with doing their job, which is serving the public, and of course, as you put it, catching wrong-uns.
How do you think this has happened then? Because it seems to me, and it strikes, we get emails all the time at GB News about the capture of many of our public institutions by this form of whackery and wokery, right? Where, as you say, right, we are a country that has enshrined in law a belief in equality and all the rest of it. Hunky-dory, happy days. But that has to be removed, surely, from British policing.
It's weak, pusillanimous senior police leadership that's been going on for years and promotes in their own like. If you don't, if you like, mind your P and Qs, you don't say whatever's the next politically correct thing to do in the police, you don't move on. So we then end up in a situation where you've got chief constables around the country, for example, will be wearing the rainbow motifs, or they'll be wearing whatever badge is appropriate, whether it's support breast cancer, care of police survivors. All of these are laudable causes and reasons why, if one's off duty and in plain clothes, you might want to show your support. But there is no place for an officer in uniform to be wearing that, or indeed a detective who's on duty dealing with the public. But chief officers are the ones who set the tone. So we move on from that and we look at where are we in policing. It's going in a steady downward decline. As you rightly say, most of the police are frankly quietly brave, courageous people who care deeply, but their standards have been allowed to drop off, they're not being guided, they're not being shown. Let me give you an example which you haven't quoted, where nobody really notices it. You'll remember the horrendous case last year of the two police officers who were manning a cordon on two sisters who'd been murdered in a park, and they took it on themselves to leave this cordon, go in and take photographs, and then distribute it on a WhatsApp group. Everyone was rightly horrified because this was appalling, disgraceful, very offensive for the family. I have not heard a single person, particularly a senior police officer, picking up what that actually was all about and the true import. The reason I say that is this. The Metropolitan Police solved that murder by recovering a small element of blood, and the DNA from that blood solved that murder. The job of those two officers was to protect that crime scene from contamination so that detectives could investigate it properly. They decided they will ignore their primary function, a complete lack of discipline, for some fun photos. The role of the police is to prevent crime and detect offenders. What has gone on where two reasonably experienced constables think it's appropriate to walk into a murder scene? You know, extraordinary. For me, you know, the punishment internally that should be provided for that is difficult for me to articulate on TV because people would be shocked.
But is that where you
think... But that's leadership. That's a failure of leadership.
Exactly.
The ethos has been lost, that we are here to detect offences, catch offenders, prevent crime. And those two people, either poor training, poor leadership and supervision, and it's not just the sergeants and the constables. A fish rots from the head.
Well, exactly. And on that point, and briefly, if you will, because we're running out of time, sadly, but if you consider, you know, the state of British policing is, I would say, in a state of flux.
Correct.
We've got a Home Secretary that many people would consider as being tough on law and order, or at least that's the image that the Home Secretary absolutely wants to project. If we can't get these reforms through that the British people want to see, which, as we've been discussing, is a focus on law and order instead of whackery and wokery, if Priti Patel can't even manage to get these reforms to the culture of policing through, and the top cheeses maybe, then what hope have we got? Is British police... You think it's done?
The bottom line on it is that the leadership at the top needs to start with basics, which is clean your shoes, press your trousers, stand up properly. Look, this morning I've just been to the rehearsal for Trooping the Colour. And as I walked along, I was walking along with another serving officer, and we were just looking at the way officers were carrying themselves in public, standing in small groups, not communicating with the public, some uniforms relatively unkempt,
one lone female officer was smiling, saying, "Good morning, hello, how are you?" Exactly what we want. But there were sergeants, inspectors, superintendents standing there, letting that go on. If we've got to that stage where the leadership are not saying, wear your clothes properly, engage with the public, you are on show. Look, there's a point I'd make this very quickly. I know you run out of time. I train on this internationally, a concept called the strategic constable. The best way of imagining what a strategic constable is this. Police are given immense powers. They can arrest you, take you into custody, even shoot you. But that power is at the lowest level. If one officer misuses that power in public, in the days of where we are, it does strategic damage. And the classic example is the death in Minneapolis of Mr. Floyd.
Indeed.
One officer sent that round the world, from New Zealand to Canada to Kenya. That whole ethos of Black Lives Matter came from that.
I could talk to you about BLM and open up a whole other discussion, but we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. But thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate your contribution. Now, folks, we're going to find out what's happening with the weather, the great British weather. Is it raining? Probably. Let's find out.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and it's looking cloudy and damp in the northwest, but some evening sunshine further southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England looks to be largely dry this evening with some cloud cover, but a bit of sunshine here and there. Temperatures in Plymouth around 15 Celsius. More bright or sunny spells across London and southeast England this evening, and still quite warm at 7 p.m. A few showers across mid and west Wales this evening, but generally a dry picture here with the best of any sunshine towards Cardiff and Newport. It's largely a dry picture for the Midlands too. That said, there will be a good deal of cloud around, but temperatures still between 18 and 16 degrees. Much of northeast England and Yorkshire should also be dry, with the best of any sunshine towards the east coast. A few splashes of rain is possible over the Pennines. It's generally cloudier skies to be expected over Scotland, with occasional light rain across the south of the country. More persistent wet weather will be moving into western areas. That same area of rain will blow to the northwest of Northern Ireland, but for much of the country, it will be a drier evening. Overnight rain at times across northern and some western areas, dry in the south and east, but some fog patches developing in southern England. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
folks, the sports section isn't relegated to the back of your newspaper if you check it today. It's been a controversial season in the Premier League. We've had a takeover which has called into question the ethics of foreign takeovers altogether. There's been a stark rise in football hooliganism, and more recently increases in pitch invasions, which has been condemned by the Football Association. We've got playoff finals, of course, and a relegation battle, and title decider heading into the final day of the Premier League tomorrow. So I'm delighted to say that joining me to discuss all of that is the sports writer for The Sun, Justin Allen. Hiya, Justin. Now, Justin, tell my viewers where you are today.
I'm at Wembley Stadium today for Sunderland against Wycombe. So Sunderland finally hoping to end 4 seasons in the 3rd tier, but Wycombe will have something to say about that.
Do you know what, Justin? I'm going to say something that's going to make me quite unpopular as a Newcastle fan, but I actually have a lot of sympathy for Sunderland, and I wish them well today. I really do. Do you reckon they're going to do it?
Yeah, do you know something? I've got this sneaky feeling they will. I mean, there's been a lot made of them not winning, playoff campaigns. They've never been promoted through a playoff. However, they did win the EFL trophy, ending their Wembley hoodoo. So I think now they've got that out of the way, that jinx has gone. There's another jinx to be got rid of today. So on paper, they should do it. But as we know, football's never played on paper. And Wycombe Wanderers, that's an incredible story in its own right.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what about this rise in pitch invasions? Because it strikes me, and I don't mean to sound like a sort of alarmist here, but it strikes me that this could get really, really dangerous, right? We saw at the Crystal Palace game how a pitch invasion can actually turn quite nasty. They seem to be getting more aggressive. Just what's going on here, and why are the upper echelons of football not taking this more seriously, do you reckon?
Well, Darren, actually 4 matches I've been to now in actually the Championship where there's been pitch invasions. There was a pitch invasion at Fulham when they got promoted. There was a pitch invasion at Bournemouth when they got promoted. There was a pitch invasion when Huddersfield got to the playoff final the other night. Same with Nottingham Forest. We saw that scene where Billy Sharp, the Sheffield United player, was physically attacked. What I don't understand, I'm all for fans enjoying the moment, enjoying whether they stay up in the Premier League or win a promotion battle. But it's quite another thing to come onto the pitch and go the opposition fans or go the opposition players or even attack them. But what's alarming is really the sort of uselessness of the stewarding, really. I mean, they know it's going to happen, and it just seems that they're just allowing them to come on. And I think, as I say, the scenes that we've seen recently at Crystal Palace and at Nottingham Forest are very, very worrying.
Indeed. I mean, for me, right, these are just a few bad apples, so we mustn't tar the game, right, with a few idiots, frankly, who have been ruining it for everyone else. Because I think you get far too many, and you know this better than I do, far too many on the likes of Twitter.com who sneer at football and want to tar every football fan with the same brush, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as I say, I've seen lots of, the majority of people, 99% of those fans that run onto the pitch, they just want to celebrate their team. It's been a long, hard season. They've been successful in whether they've survived from relegation or got promoted, and it's all great to be getting selfies and singing and dancing with your team. I'm all for that, but it's literally this small element that's creeping more and more into it. And what I don't want to do, what I don't want to see is a mountain made out of a molehill. I think they just need to be more preventive and just root out who these idiots are. I mean, they got footage of that guy, didn't they, who attacked Billy Sharp, and he's already been in court, pleaded guilty. These people we've got to come down hard on them, and that means perhaps a life ban. Perhaps that's the only way to do it.
Justin, I haven't got very long left with you, unfortunately, but I wonder if I can whittle off a few questions and you respond to them as quickly as you can. Man City clinched the title, or is there an upset on the cards, do you reckon?
Do you know what? I was looking at these fixtures. Liverpool have got Wolves at home, City against Villa. I can't see either dropping any point. But you know what football's like? If suddenly there's a goal in the Liverpool game and City are being held and getting frustrated, that's when it gets very exciting. And, I'm a West Ham fan. I remember West Ham stopping Liverpool winning the title in the past. I've seen us stop Man United winning the title in the past, and when we've already been relegated. So anything is possible on that final day.
Who's going to be relegated to the Championship?
Do you know something? I think it's going to be Leeds United. I don't know if you know the story. 2 years ago, Leeds released a video goading and gloating about their promotion to the Premier League at Brentford's expense. Fast forward 2 years, where they're going to Brentford, where only a win will keep them in the Premier League, or guaranteed to keep them in the Premier League. I think Burnley are just going to get over the line.
Fascinating stuff, and we will see in this massive, massive weekend for sport in general. Justin Allen there, sports writer at The Sun. As always, thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, you're with GB News on telly and DAB radio. Next, we'll be talking about women being selected to referee the Men's World Cup in Qatar later this year. They'll be supported by 3 female assistant referees. But first, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Bethany.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 33 minutes past 2. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray on the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule breaking while it was being drafted. Well, former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt told GB News he wouldn't have had lockdowns in the first place. Unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history as 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies vote on action over pay. Network sources say it could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith has called for benefits to be boosted in line with inflation to shield against mounting living costs. He said rebates and discretionary funds represent a step in the wrong direction for tackling poverty, arguing it would be better to uplift universal credit. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has declared a travel ban on 963 Americans, including President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and CIA Chief William Burns. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has conceded defeat in a national election, with the Labour Party set to take power. But Labour may have to form a minority government, as it looks likely it will fall short of the required 76 seats for a majority. Scott Morrison has also announced he will step down as leader of the Liberal Party. The Liberal National Coalition lost ground to climate-focused parties like the Greens and Independents. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. We'll get back to Darren Grimes in just a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's 2 questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, folks. It's now 2:37 and we're moving on to a story which really made me quite happy this week. It was announced that female referees will officiate at the Men's World Cup for the first time in Qatar. Women from France, Rwanda and Japan have been selected to take charge of the games at the tournament. Well, joining me to discuss this is Janie Frampton, who is a former referee on the men's professional game. Janie, you must be delighted to see this, are you?
Oh my goodness, I cannot tell you how delighted. I can honestly say I didn't see it coming. However, the girls were making such big strides in different men's competitions that I thought it could come, but I just didn't see it coming.
Why is it taking so long then, do you reckon?
You know, that's a really good question. Because I strongly believe wholeheartedly that anybody who is good enough for the job, you strip away the gender and just let them do the job. So we've taken so long to get this far. I can't believe we have, to be honest, because for once now they've stripped away woman and just said these referees have been appointed.
Do you say to those then, Janie, who would argue that actually they might say things, misogynistic tropes maybe, like women are too emotional for the game, too emotional to officiate the game? What would you say to that?
I'd say it's their problem, not ours, not us as women referees. Women have heard pretty much everything there is to hear because there's still a lot of football that didn't want women involved. So the fact that, you know, there's been people like Pierluigi Collina that have taken really big decisions to make this happen because they believe it's right. Now, the women are going to get trolls. They're going to get lots of social media bad press. But do you know what? The good stuff is going to outweigh it. So we just have to take that because it's going to happen.
Janie, I wonder if you agree with me that there are certain optics at play here, because let's consider the fact that it's been held in Qatar, right? Not exactly renowned for its equality agenda, shall we say. How significant do you reckon it is that the decision has been made in a country like Qatar?
Absolutely fabulous. And I think you're right, you know. I think that sends a huge message because we knew that Qatar have certain social issues and some of those involve women allowed into stadiums. I will still be really interested to see how many women are allowed in the stadiums to the amount of men. But I think this is a landmark case, not just the women that have been appointed, but they've been appointed to Qatar.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the optics are going to be quite incredible. But Janie, I know that you're a huge fan of the women's game as well, and it's the Champions League final tonight. Who are you backing?
Well, sadly, I'm not going to be able to see it, but I tend to back football, if I'm honest. And I remember I officiated on the first Women's Champions League final a lot of years ago. And it's great to see how the women's game has moved forward. We're still a long way behind with refereeing, generally. But this, I just hope that this appointment of the women to the Men's World Cup is going to start a whole recruitment retention campaign for women because they can see different goals.
Now, on that point then, on the point of there not being enough women referees, how do you think you smash through that remaining glass ceiling, as it were, right? How do you actually convince a next generation of young women that actually this is something that could appeal to them? It might well appeal to them, Janie, but they might just think the stigma attached to it would be too terrible for them to pursue it. How did you end up getting into it? How easy is it to actually break in to refereeing?
You know what? It's really tough. And I can't say any different. We do have, you know, the FA will quote numbers of women referees has risen, but that's very much at grassroots and they don't stay. And that is our biggest problem because you've got to be really tough to be able to succeed in that environment. That's the bit that we struggle with. And I think we need to make it relevant to women, that actually you have to be tough, but there's a lot of people to support you. So we need far more male advocates in this country to support women referees. And that has not been the case in the past. Without a doubt, it has not. But we do need male advocates because they are the ones that are still the decision makers in football, and they are the ones that can make it happen.
Janie, I agreed with something that you said at the very start of this interview when you said, you remarked that actually we should just strip away the gender, right? We should just look at how competent the individual is for the role, whether that be refereeing or whether that be playing on the pitch. Now, I actually think that we're getting there, right? Slowly but surely. You wouldn't look at a female referee and think it odd to see her on the pitch for a male's game.
I want that to be the case. I mean, when I could remember officiating way back on the men's professional leagues, and I was on the line, and one of a former professional player who was of high level, he came across and he put the ball down at the corner. He said, "Iya, we got a tart on the line. How long have you been there then, darling?" And do you know what was really good about that? For 67 minutes, he hadn't noticed I was a woman.
Yeah.
So I tell that story not because it was anything more than banter, because it wasn't anything more, but the fact that I was just treated as an assistant referee, regardless of my gender. Now, all of these years later, we haven't moved forward a great deal. You know, we've got Sian Massey and the other girls on the Football League. I mean, you look at Sian, she's done an amazing job, but, you know, Sian is technically excellent. If she was on, okay, she operates on the man's game, but there would have been nothing stopping Sian from being on the man's international game because she was that good. But she was a girl.
Mm-hmm. Well, Janie, I think things are changing and they're changing for the better. So thank you, Janie Frampton, for giving us your expert analysis on refereeing. Now, folks, coming up now, are Brits racists? If you read The Guardian, you probably think we are. Yet a huge majority of us would be happy to see minority ethnic Prime Minister in number 10 Downing Street. A new poll showing 84% of us wouldn't be bothered. This seems like some good news to me that perhaps hasn't had enough exposure in certain pockets of the media. I wonder why. Joining me to discuss is Dr. Rakib Hassan, a senior data analyst at the Centre for Social Justice. Rakib, thank you very much for your company. Why do you think this hasn't received as much analysis and media coverage as perhaps a poll that would suggest Britain is a swivel-eyed racist nation would?
Well, I think that we've seen that drive in certain sections of the media which have sought to portray Britain as some kind of fundamentally racist hellscape, which is full to the brim with bigoted reactionary throwbacks. But the reality of the matter is, Darren, that's just not reflected in existing survey data. This latest study produced by British Future very much shows that we are a country which is very much at ease with diversity. While the public may well appreciate that there are complications that come with diversity, when it comes to political leadership, the vast majority of the country, in the region of 85%, would be comfortable if the next Prime Minister was of an ethnic minority background. And around 3 in 4 people believe that ethnic diversity is now part of British culture as opposed to posing a threat to it. So I suspect that we haven't heard much about this because it doesn't really fit much of the narrative setting which we have seen in recent times in terms of portraying Britain as a very difficult place to live if you are a member of an ethnic minority, which is simply not the case.
I mean, Rakib, what do you reckon about this 14% who don't fully back a minority Prime Minister? I mean, ultimately, do you think that actually at least a small percentage of the 14% may well be looking at there are certain communities in Britain, and Rakib, you have written about this, I've read it with real interest. There are certain communities that perhaps they feel removed, actually, from British society, might not speak the language, yada, yada, yada. Maybe actually that's the resentment that is created from certain sections of the British public that were polled here. Do you think that's it? Am I onto something or talking complete and utter nonsense?
No, I wouldn't say that at all, Dan. I think that Britain remains one of the most successful examples of a post-World War II diverse democracy in the world. But we mustn't rest on our laurels. There's no room for complacency. We do have an issue when it comes to closed off, segregated communities, especially in a string of post-industrial towns across northern England. And we also see that in some of our inner city areas as well. So I think there is much work to be done in terms of cultivating social cohesion. I think we have to be very wary of the threat of what I consider to be American-style identity politics, which does pose a threat to British community relations. The UK and the US have very different national histories, especially when it comes to race. So I think that we really need to focus on the UK, try to boost equality of opportunity, but also provide a political space for people to air their grievances, especially when it comes to matters of social cohesion.
Exactly, because I mean, we are not America. If you consider, right, 58%, as you well say in that poll, saying that they don't feel ethnicity was at all relevant, right? A lot of people just shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, I don't care. What I care about is the right person for the job, be that a man or a woman, black or white, whatever, right? So should we even be having this discussion, right? Should we not just all get on with our lives, accept that Britain is actually a pretty decent place to live? You know, you've won the lottery of life as far as I'm concerned, and move on with our lives and stop talking about these American issues.
No, absolutely. I think that for all its flaws, the UK outranks a number of other multi-ethnic countries in Europe, the likes of France, Germany, the Netherlands, when it comes to providing anti-discrimination protections on the grounds of race, religion and ethnicity. And the reality of the matter is it fares very well when it comes to the provision of religious freedoms as well. But I'm ultimately with you, Darren, in that when it comes to the kind of Prime Minister I would like, I'm not remotely interested in protected characteristics, if truth be told. I ultimately would like to see a Prime Minister which is trustworthy, their heart is in the right place, they're competent, that they pay attention to detail, but they don't shy away from making difficult decisions in the name of the broader social interest. And I think that much of the country thinks that way as well.
But what about if we go back, and we're going back quite some time if you consider it's all the way back into the 19th century, but Benjamin Disraeli, could you not argue that he could well have been a minority prime minister back in the day and a conservative?
Absolutely. And I do think that if we are having this discussion about which party will the first ethnic minority prime minister belong to, there's a very strong likelihood that will be the Conservative Party. But that's more because the Conservative Party is far more efficient than the Labour Party when it comes to winning elections. I think that's the primary factor there. But I do think that compared to other centre-right parties in the Western world, the Conservative Party is relatively comfortable when it comes to matters of diversity. And you do see ethnic minority Tory MPs occupying high positions within the party. I think you also see rising stars such as Kemi Badenoch, which has really impressed large sections of the British public with her comments on race relations and pushing back on divisive identity politics. So I think on the whole, when we look at race relations, I think there's no room for complacency. I do think that equality of opportunity must be improved in modern day Britain, but I think that we should also celebrate the progress that has been made.
Absolutely. Beautiful way to end that discussion. Dr. Rakib Hassan, Senior Data Analyst at the Centre for Social Justice, thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, last week, a leading Cambridge professor said that white private school boys are now the most disadvantaged when applying to Oxbridge, Oxford or Cambridge. Being white, male and privileged is apparently increasingly being frowned upon. David Abolafi, a fellow of Gonville and Cannock College, said he suggested that actually to combat this disapproval of white male candidates, school names should be removed from the application. By listing their private schools, students are actually penalising themselves for their parents' choice. Not a fair, I mean, an ultimately fair point, isn't it? And actually betraying the principles on which Cambridge has flourished, he argued. This, for me, has raised questions as to whether universities should offer places on merit or should they continue to pursue policies of positive discrimination I do that in quotes, folks, for our listeners on radio, in order to reach so-called equality. Well, joining me now to discuss this is trainee teacher Ryan Bell-Morley and Craig Liddle, a law and politics student. Craig, can I start with you? Should universities positively discriminate, and again I say that there is no such thing, if you ask me, of positive discrimination, to achieve equality?
Well, Darren, I think we should be sending the message to future generations that it should be your hard work that is the thing that matters. I mean, it's what I was told throughout my time at school. Because at the end of the day, if you put the hard work into it, that should be the crucial point when it comes to universities choosing which students they want to attend. Now, you know, there's other ways in which universities can get around this issue of having more people from other walks of life to attend our universities. Whether that's through the introduction of foundation degrees, which I think is an excellent way of allowing a wider breadth of students to attend a university, but still through their merit, not because of a simple tick box. Crucially, I think the partnership between local schools and local universities is very crucial in trying to get people from more walks of life to attend these prestigious universities. And I have to say, Darren, in my local area with the University of Kent and my local school, it was incredibly crucial to me that we had that connection. Otherwise, I wouldn't have attended my university.
Brilliant. Ryan Bell-Morley, if we have more people going to university, though, they're just going to end up as left-wing as you are, aren't they?
I think you make a good point there. Obviously, uni is a place where you experience a lot of different things, ideas, cultures, and that's part of the reason why I think reform is necessary. So positive discrimination obviously can go too far, but if we truly want to see difference in our universities, we need to introduce it. Like you said there, people work hard, but people work hard from all different walks of life, and it all comes down to the lottery as well. So the lottery of life, like you mentioned in the last segment. So people who are born into middle-class families are lucky enough to be provided with more resources to give them an advantage in life. Really, positive discrimination is evening out the field. So it's giving everyone the same chance. On top of this, our universities should always give a great reflection of our society, and universities being primarily made up of the middle class or upper class is far from a fair representation.
Well, Ryan, I think you've got a fantastic accent, and I'm going to guess, right, that you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. But do you not think ultimately it would be really patronising for someone to be able to suggest that you got there just because of the accident of birth, right? Because of the circumstances that you were born into, and not down to genuine hard work and effort?
Now, what I'd just like to clarify there is the last thing I want to do is patronise someone, because like we mentioned before, you can't help which walk of life you're born into. The point I was trying to make is that people who were born into an upper-class family are instantly presented with a better chance at education. They have more encouragement around them, and there's arguably a greater pressure in that sort of area of society to achieve more. Really, we need to be pushing people from the lower class of society, ethnic minorities, etc., to actually try university. Just because other members of your family haven't, doesn't mean that you shouldn't. And that's why positive discrimination is key.
Craig, we're just coming to the end there. Can I ask you for your, very briefly if you would, final points on what you've just heard there?
Well, to go back on what the gentleman said, I mean, to be quite frank, as I just said, the crucial thing here, I think, is a partnership between local universities and local schools, because that, at least in my area, is what unlocked people from disadvantaged backgrounds to actually go and attend to university. And it is working. We've seen throughout the years that more and more people are attending university from poorer backgrounds, and that's something we should all be celebrating. And to me, that just shows how unnecessary this whole thing is turning out to be.
Right, we're going to have to leave it there, folks, but thank you very much for your contribution. A fascinating debate. I'm sure our viewers will agree. Now, folks, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers, as always, for your company. I'm going to be back for another busy hour, but first, we're going to get an update on the weather. Is it raining, folks? Let's find out.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and it's looking cloudy and damp in the northwest, but some evening sunshine further southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England looks to be largely dry this evening with some cloud cover, but a bit of sunshine here and there. Temperatures in Plymouth around 15 Celsius. More bright or sunny spells across London and southeast England this evening, and still quite warm at 7 p.m. A few showers across mid and west Wales this evening, but generally a dry picture here with the best of any sunshine towards Cardiff and Newport. It's largely a dry picture for the Midlands too. That said, there will be a good deal of cloud around, but temperatures still between 18 and 16 degrees. Much of northeast England and Yorkshire should also be dry, with the best of any sunshine towards the east coast. A few splashes of rain is possible over the Pennines. It's generally cloudier skies to be expected over Scotland, with occasional light rain across the south of the country. More persistent wet weather will be moving into western areas. That same area of rain will blow to the northwest of Northern Ireland, but for much of the country, it will be a drier evening. Overnight rain at times across northern and some western areas, dry in the south and east, but some fog patches developing in southern England. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. This is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company and for joining on telly, DAB and online. I'll be with you until 4 p.m. today, but first, here's the news with Bethany.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray over the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule-breaking parties while it was being drafted. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, says people deserve to know the truth. Well, former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt told GB News he wouldn't have had lockdowns in the first place.
Would I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have because of my experience as Health Secretary, but I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history, which could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies are voting on action over pay. Crisis talks are underway to try and keep passenger and freight trains running if it goes ahead. Supply chain expert and owner of Export Unlocked, Richard Bartlett, told GB News it's bad news for the consumer.
Supply chain for the consumer is everything. The whole chain is working. If that chain's not working, or there's a delay, or there's extra costs, there's delays at ports, there's delays everywhere else, has a huge effect because these are normally ordered within a period of time. They're not ordered tomorrow for next week. They're ordered in advance. And if that advance rule of 3 months starts to slow down, it has a huge effect. And we're certainly seeing that. We're certainly seeing price increases. There's no question about that.
Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith has called for benefits to be boosted in line with inflation to shield against mounting living costs. He said rebates and discretionary funds represent a step in the wrong direction for tackling poverty. The government is already handing out £150 council tax rebates, and for many homes will take £200 off energy bills from October. Gavin Rice from the Centre for Social Justice think tank told GB News the government should also boost universal credit.
We're suggesting is something that's a bit more modest, which is just you increase universal credit in line with the rising cost of living. That would be less expensive than the £20 uplift. It would not be, as it were, an absolute increase to generosity, but it would just ensure that the very poorest in our society have got enough coming in that they can cover these extraordinary rises in the cost of electricity and gas.
In other news, the Foreign Secretary will meet with a top Democratic leader over government plans to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It follows the US House Speaker's warning that Congress won't support a free trade deal with the UK if it discards the post-Brexit agreement. New legislation is expected in early June. Police chiefs are planning to apologise over allegations of racism and discrimination within their ranks. In a report by the Police Chiefs Council, due to be published next week, leaders will commit to being institutionally anti-racist. The report highlights how powers are being disproportionately applied to black people, and it admits that having only 2 black officers reach Chief Constable or Assistant Commissioner rank in policing's history is a huge failure. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. It's now launched a major offensive in Luhansk, where shelling continues as its forces press for control of the Donbass region. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has declared a travel ban on 963 Americans, including President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and CIA Chief William Burns. Boris Johnson has congratulated Labour's Anthony Albanese on his election as Prime Minister of Australia. Outgoing Prime Minister Scott Morrison conceded defeat despite millions of votes yet to be counted. Scott Morrison has also announced he will step down as leader of the Liberal Party after losing ground to environment and climate-focused parties like the Greens and Independents.
And so on a night like tonight, it is proper to acknowledge the functioning of our democracy. I've always believed in Australians and their judgment, and I've always been prepared to accept their verdicts. And tonight they have delivered their verdict, and I congratulate Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party, and I wish him and his government all the very best.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, let's get back to Darren.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Here's what's coming up over the next hour. Can Jamie Oliver have his cake and eat it? The celebrity chef took a giant sugary dessert, a so-called Eton mess, to Downing Street yesterday to demand new bans of fast food deals. And the government has cut all ties with the National Union of Students over alleged anti-Semitism. We'll be explaining why that is. And finally, defending a bronze of the Iron Lady, I'll speak to the director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom about why the former Tory Prime Minister is still angering the left in 2023. 22. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. I'd love to know your thoughts, though. Much more important than my own. Tweet me at GBNews or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook. Loads of fantastic interaction on our GB News page. Cheers very much. Now, folks, as I say, on Friday, Jamie Oliver held a protest outside Downing Street demanding that the government ban 2-for-1 deals on junk food. It was meant to happen this year, but it's now not going to go ahead. Jamie Oliver actually wants the government to follow his plan that he says will help working people lose weight. He called it the Eton Mess protest. Do you see what he did there? And he waved around this dessert, which, of course, the Prime Minister went to Eton College, yada, yada, yada. Yes, very funny, Mr. Oliver. And it's served at the annual cricket match against the pupils of Harrow School as well. So, quite the man of the people with that reference. But is banning cheap food the way to help Brits get in shape? Do you reckon? Let me know. Indeed, is government action ever, folks, the answer to our personal problems? Or is it time to revive personal responsibility? Well, let's hear some different views on either side of that question for our Culture Raw segment today. I'm delighted to say that joining me in the studio now is the author and journalist Amy Nichol, and joining me virtually is Christopher Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Now, Amy, I'll start with you. You reckon this is a good idea, no? And that the government should actually side with Jamie Oliver here, accept that he's right, and ban these offers?
No, you've got that completely wrong, actually. I really don't agree with Jamie Oliver on this one. I think that suggesting that an Eton Mess and buy one, get one free deals are responsible for the obesity crisis that this country faces is cosmetic at best. At the moment, since in the last 5 years, eating disorders have soared by 1,000%. 84% increase on hospital admissions and eating disorders, linked, I would say, directly to the pandemic, to lockdowns, to stress, to anxiety. 60% of those who are obese have a mental health problem as well. And eating disorders disproportionately affect people with obesity. To suggest it's what they put in their mouths is just the very, 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 very end of the story. And the causes of obesity are far, far, far deeper and more ingrained than what Jamie Oliver is suggesting. And I think it's really insulting that he would just take away what is seen as convenience to most people, because that's what most people want, is convenience, especially now at a time when food prices are rising 20% in the last year. I believe people haven't got time and they haven't got money, and it is not at all the answer to tackling obesity. OK.
Chris Snowdon, you must agree with much that Amy said there, because ultimately, right, the cost of living, the Bank of England even warning that food prices are going to be apocalyptic. I mean, this is all pretty serious stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad policy at any time, but I mean, the optics of introducing this ban in October when inflation is predicted to peak at above 10% would be terrible. And so I wasn't at all surprised when the government delayed it. And they are only delaying it by a year, by the way. They're not scrapping it. I think they should scrap it completely. They're only delaying it. So this little protest yesterday, which was mainly just Jamie Oliver and a few journalists and some of his employees, really, it's over very little. But yeah, I mean, it should be scrapped completely, because, I mean, the idea of the justification for scrapping it, obviously, is that we've got a cost of living crisis. And as Public Health England themselves admitted when they proposed this policy 7 years ago, they accepted that during times of inflation in particular, families rely on these kind of deals as what they call a coping mechanism. To make their money go further. And so doing it now when, inflation, we're looking at double-digit inflation, probably already got double-digit inflation, clearly doesn't make sense. But really, October 2024 or October 2023, I guess it's going to be coming in now. Is the cost of living going to be, down so much? I shouldn't think so. I don't think there's ever a good time to bring in a policy like this.
Yeah. I mean, Amy, then, do you think there's ever a role? Because what you set out there I think is, for most viewers or listeners, it'll be quite alarming, those stats that you suggested we're all
definitely. And that's where the government really could help. I think they owe it to us.
So there is a role for government.
There's a role for the government to provide medical care for those who are living with obesity. And at the moment, that area is sorely underfunded, as it is across the board with all eating disorder treatment. The waiting lists are truly shocking. There's a massive problem with people awaiting treatment. Most people who seek treatment to help them with obesity, they go private. There's also the issue of fat phobia within society, which actually puts a lot of people living with obesity off going to their doctor and seeking help. And we see that a lot, and there's a lot linked to that. There's employment discrimination. There's discrimination across the board if you are living in a larger body. And also sometimes I always hate the way this conversation can veer into equating health with size, because that correlation isn't necessarily correct. It's not a fact that living in a larger body is unhealthy and can be harming your health. It's a lot more nuance to it. I would just like to see more funding in helping those people living with eating disorders, which affect, like I said, disproportionately those living with obesity. And interestingly, only 6% of people seeking help for an eating disorder are underweight. And actually, normally so people who have bulimia, for example, they are normally, an effect of that is to put on weight. And that's a big myth in our society that, if you have an eating disorder, you're very thin.
Okay.
It's really not the case. And a lot of this is linked to that.
So, Christopher, then, I'm assuming that you at the Institute of Economic Affairs are not in favour of suggesting that the government just needs to spend more of taxpayer cash to get us all to stop shoving so much down our gullets.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to these so-called preventive measures, I've yet to see a policy that looks like it could even plausibly work. The government goes to great lengths in its impact assessments to try and conjure up some numbers to make it look as if it's worth bringing in the policy. So in the case of this ban on multi-buy deals, for example, it does all sorts of calculations, and at the end of it comes up with the conclusion that people are going to consume 8 fewer calories per day as a result of this policy, and some of the other policies, it's always around that kind of level. That's such an incredibly trivial amount, walking up and down a staircase kind of level of calorie reduction. So it's not just that I'm against it in principle, although I basically am. It's also that it's just, this stuff is so ineffective. It's very difficult for a lot of people to lose weight. I think what you have in society, you have people with eating disorders, as has been said. Then you have a whole lot of people who don't really mind being fat, and it's not the worst thing in the world for a lot of people to be fat. And you make the trade-off of eating a lot and not exercising, and okay, I'm fat, I'll be fat. And then you've got people who aren't happy being fat and are trying to lose weight, and they find it very difficult to do so. Despite trying very hard and using all sorts of techniques. So I don't think the little government broad brush policies are going to make a difference when people can't lose weight when they try very hard.
But a lot of the people that
Amy, before you respond to that, Christopher, I guess you would point to the sugar tax, right? And some might argue that has been an effective measure because it's had these companies reformulate their drinks that we all buy.
It's basically...
If that's your measure of success, yeah, but the point of the sugar tax was to reduce obesity, and it hasn't reduced obesity. It was particularly aimed at reducing childhood obesity.
So Amy, what do you say to that?
Something that I align this whole idea with is in Scotland when they raised the price of alcohol per unit, and it didn't have any effect on how people used and drank alcohol. And I think this is a very similar thing. Just because we try and limit what people can buy, it doesn't actually affect how much. If you want something, you're going to get it either way. And most people with these offers, they will just buy them and use them responsibly in how they're intended to shove them in the freezer, have them another time. And it's like, it just doesn't really correlate with the results that the government suggests would happen just in the case of any food ban or alcohol raising the prices. It doesn't affect the user ultimately. I think one thing that I think me and Christopher might disagree on is I think the onus could be slightly more on the manufacturer to make these convenient foods more healthy. And I know this is something that Mars have tried to do. And
would
I
you
actually
do that
quite
through
like-
taxation, Amy? Would you do that through, would it be regulation you want to see from the government? How would you force these manufacturers to actually go the way you want them to?
I don't know. I just think there should be some incentive to introducing convenience foods that have a more better nutritional offers. But I know that Christopher is not as keen on that idea.
So, Chris, then, that's basically nudge policy, isn't it, right? The government trying to actually nudge these manufacturers to reformulate their products. Isn't that sensible?
Well, that's been going on for a while, and again, it's not really working. I mean, these companies don't need to be nudged by the government. They are nudged by market forces. Right? You've got 60-odd% of the population overweight. Most of those people probably would quite like to lose a little bit of weight. The trouble is, you've got the trade-off with taste, right? So you can cut down on the sugar or the calories, but almost invariably you lose the flavour. And when push comes to shove, people actually value flavour over, a small reduction in the calorie content of the product.
I really draw issue with this idea that 60% of the population are obese, because they are. But then I think the way that we gauge obesity in this country is slightly off, because I had myself a medical the other day. Apparently, I'm overweight. I know a lot of people in the same situation who are quite surprised. And I think that actually size isn't equal to health, and that you can have a larger body and be perfectly fine. And I think the way that we say who's bigger and it doesn't necessarily take into account the way much of society is today, and the reality is that like 2/3 of women are 16, size 16 or over, and I don't think that might push up the percentage of people that are considered.
I do agree that there is an issue with the measurements to some extent, but I'm not technically overweight, but I could still do with losing a stone. I think what I'm saying is there is a very large number of people in the country who would like to lose weight, and therefore, if a company could come up with this holy grail of a chocolate bar that's got half as many calories in it, or an eaten mess that's got half as much sugar in it, then you don't need the government to nudge the companies. If the companies could come up with these products, they would make billions, if not trillions, in a very short space of time. The trouble is, unfortunately it's impossible. And let's see somebody like Jamie Oliver do it first. There's a lot of pressure on these companies to take out the salt, take out the sugar, take out the fat. Okay, well, you do it first, put it on the market, and see how you do. But they keep. I mean, I bet you these new Mars bars and new Bounty bars flop in the market. I'm quite convinced they will do, because these products nearly always do.
So Chris basically saying that these people should put their money where their mouth is, Amy.
I just like to go back a little bit where we say, well, people want to lose weight. I think a lot of people at the moment feel this pressure to be a certain size, because our standard of beauty is set at maybe a size 10, size 12. And I think that's a problem, because we need to think, why do a lot of people want to lose weight? Do they necessarily need to for their health? Or is it because we have a society that is quite happy to think, OK, you're not in your control how tall you are, what colour hair you have, what colour eyes you have, but somehow your size should be this very, very, very narrow chance of possibilities. So I think if we look at our relationship to the way that we had potentially demonise larger bodies, then that could also play into the reason that a lot of people want to lose weight. And it's not necessarily because of a health concern, it's because of society's problem with people in larger bodies.
Christopher, just very briefly, if you would, we're running out of time here. Just to sum up, why would it be a bad idea? Surely everything Amy's saying, most viewers today will be nodding their heads saying, yes, this is very sensible. Yes, Amy's speaking sense for once. Why are you opposed to the government actually playing a role to make Britain healthier?
Well, I'm not, it's not a kind of blanket ban from me on government action. It's, show me the policies. Let's have a look at them. Let's see what the trade-offs are, what the costs and benefits are, what the unintended consequences are. And then, we can introduce them. The traffic light labelling on foods, for example, that you get in shops. I was pretty sceptical about that to start with. I don't know how much difference it's made, but actually I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I think having nutritional content on food is a reasonable thing to do. I'm of two minds on whether it should be on menus in pubs and places, but I'm open to some of these ideas. They just need to be effective and not damaging. And most of the policies being introduced, a sugar tax, this bog-off ban and so on, they're damaging because they, apart from anything else, they impose significant costs, and particularly on the poorest in society.
Well, there we are. A good way to end that very reasonable discussion. That was Amy Nicol, the campaigner here in the studio, and Christopher Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Now, folks, there's plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next, we'll be going back to basics on the National Union of Students. This week, the Minister for Universities announced that the government is severing all ties with that union. Why is that? Why would you get rid of ties with the NUS? But first, folks, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and it's looking cloudy and damp in the northwest, but some evening sunshine further southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England looks to be largely dry this evening with some cloud cover, but a bit of sunshine here and there. Temperatures in Plymouth around 15 Celsius. More bright or sunny spells across London and southeast England this evening, and still quite warm at 7 p.m. A few showers across mid and west Wales this evening, but generally a dry picture here with the best of any sunshine towards Cardiff and Newport. It's largely a dry picture for the Midlands too. That said, there will be a good deal of cloud around, but temperatures still between 18 and 16 degrees. Much of northeast England and Yorkshire should also be dry, with the best of any sunshine towards the east coast. A few splashes of rain is possible over the Pennines. It's generally cloudier skies to be expected over Scotland, with occasional light rain across the south of the country. More persistent wet weather will be moving into western areas. That same area of rain will blow to the northwest of Northern Ireland, but for much of the country, it will be a drier evening. Overnight rain at times across northern and some western areas, dry in the south and east, but some fog patches developing in southern England. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, folks, this week, Michelle Donnellan, the Minister for Universities, announced, quite shocking you might think, announced that the government is severing all ties with the National Union of Students, known as the NUS. The institution, which claims to represent millions of students across the nation, has recently elected a new president with reportedly a history of anti-Semitic tweets. But this is about far, far more than a few admittedly historic tweets. Anti-Semitism in the NUS and left-wing student movements in general has been an increasing problem for some years. Now, this segment, my Back to Basics segment, we explain to you what's going on. And what I want to know today is why the NUS has this anti-Semitism scandal and why the government has chosen now to actually act. Well, joining me to discuss, I'm delighted to say, is Jake Wallace-Simmons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Jake, thank you very much for your company.
Thank you for having me.
Jake, could you just give us a quick history of the anti-Semitism scandals over recent years in the NUS that have led us to this point for the government to make such a damning conclusion?
Goodness, well, I think a proper history would take a very long time to go into, but let's look at a few snapshots from recent years, the past year or two. And again, imagine that you're seeing this through the eyes of a Jewish student. You're 19, 18 years old, just come up to university. The NUS, National Union of Students, in March, to its annual conference, invited a rapper called Low-Key to perform. Now, Low-Key, I don't know if viewers have heard of him, but he's well known for his hard-left Corbynite views, and in particular his very virulent anti-Zionism, which many have criticised as tipping over into anti-Semitism. We look at his lyrics of his songs, talk about the Zionist lobby and things like that. So he was supposed to give a performance at the NUS's conference. Now, it says a lot about the culture of an organisation by which someone like that will be asked to perform. So Jewish students complained about him being asked to perform, and they were told, you know what, we've got this safe space which is being used for autistic students and students who can't take a lot of stimulation. Why don't you go over there for Low-Key's concert? So basically being asked to self-segregate. So that's one example. Another example, there was a chap called David Miller, who was a professor at Bristol University, teaching in sociology many anti-Israel theories, shall we say, about the reach of Israel supposedly into British society. He was sacked, but he, in an email to the Jewish Chronicle, accused Jewish students of being pawns of Israel, pawns of what he called a violent, regime of ethnic cleansing. And then the last thing is the election of the new president that you mentioned earlier. She has made a lot of tweets which people have criticised as being intensely anti-Semitic, including calling a Muslim anti-Hamas preacher a dirty Zionist, including citing this Muslim war cry, Kaiba Kaiba al-Yahud, which evokes a 7th century massacre of Jews. And including praising very controversial Muslim cleric who's called for God to kill the Jews. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is a whole culture that dominates the NUS and campuses as a whole up and down this country.
OK, Jake, what I want to know from you then, we're clear now on why that's happened with the NUS and why the government have made this decision. But it strikes me that there's a strain of anti-Semitism that has ran through the left for goodness only knows how long, much longer than I've been on this planet, put it that way. And it seems to me to get away with it in ways in which other forms of virulent racism simply wouldn't be allowed to get away with it. And I want to know why. Why is that?
Well, I think there's a couple of sleights of hand that take place in this process. The first thing is that they, repackage anti-Semitism as what's known as anti-Zionism. The late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Britain, said that in the past, during the medieval times, Jews were hated for their religion, Christ killers or whatever. During the 20th century, they were hated for their race, Hitler and so forth. But these days, they're hated for their nation state. And so this same hatred has mutated, but there's some sleights of hand that have come into it in the last, few decades. And one is that people can say, I just have problems with Israel, not with Jews. I'm an anti-Zionist, so I'm free to now obsess about Israel's, every sort of, every small indiscretion that Israel commits. I can obsess about that. I can magnify it. I can accuse it of crimes it never committed. But that's okay. I'm only anti-Zionist. And the other thing that happens as well is that the whole thing is packaged up in a kind of social justice presentation. So what people on the hard left in particular, the way they present themselves is that they are standing up for the underdog. They're fighting back against colonialism, against white oppression, and so on and so forth. And Israel is bundled into that and represented as if they are the good guys rather than the anti-Semites.
So, Jake, do you think then, were the Labour Party to win the next election, do you think the government's relationship with the NUS would be back on track? Where's the Labour Party on this? Do we know?
Well, that's a very, very good and pertinent question. I mean, since Sir Keir Starmer took over as Labour leader, he's done quite a lot to try to reverse the culture of the party. Keir Starmer's wife has Jewish heritage, and he has some involvement in Jewish traditions and has gone out, on a limb really to reach out to the Jewish community and show confidence. But at the same time, we can't ignore the fact that he campaigned to put Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. And if he was a better campaigner, if the Labour Party were more effective prior to 2019, Corbyn could be number 10 and Keir Starmer could be Home Secretary or Attorney General or whatever. And so, although there's an increasing level of confidence in the Jewish community that Keir Starmer would put his money where his mouth is were he elected and confront...
We'll see. Only time will tell.
The jury is still out to some extent.
Jake Wallace-Simmons, thank you very much for your time today. Now, folks, you're with GB News on telly and DAB radio. Next, we're going to be discussing the controversy over the new Maggie Thatcher statue. But now, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Darren. It's 33 minutes past 3. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour is calling on Boris Johnson to urgently explain his meeting with Sue Gray on the so-called Partygate report. It's understood the two have met at least once to discuss the report into COVID rule breaking while it was being drafted. Unions are warning of potentially the biggest rail strike in modern history as 40,000 staff members from Network Rail and 15 train companies vote on action over pay. Network sources say it could create serious challenges in keeping goods moving and supermarket shelves stocked. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith has called for benefits to be boosted in line with inflation to shield against mounting living costs. He said rebates and discretionary funds represent a step in the wrong direction for tackling poverty, arguing it would be better to uplift universal credit. Russia has claimed victory in the battle for the port city of Mariupol after Ukrainian soldiers in the final stronghold surrendered. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has declared a travel ban on 963 Americans, including President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and CIA Chief William Burns. And outgoing Prime Minister Scott Morrison conceded defeat in Australia's national elections despite millions of votes yet to be counted. Boris Johnson has congratulated Labour's incoming Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who says his goal is to unite the country.
Australian people have voted for change. I am humbled by this victory, and I'm honoured to be given the opportunity to serve as the 31st Prime Minister of Australia. My Labor team will work every day to bring Australians together, and I will lead a government worthy of the people of Australia.
You're up to date. It's GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. We'll be back with Darren Grimes in just a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Now, folks, next up in the show, I'm joined by the director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Not only is her legacy, including, of course, free trade and lower taxation, under attack, but a new bronze statue of the Iron Lady in her hometown of Grantham has been physically attacked this week, with people actually selling eggs to pelt at the statue outside of it. So I'm joined now by Niall Gardner. Thank you very much for your company. Now, the Margaret Thatcher Centre, I'm assuming, given your name, at the Heritage Foundation, is opposed to this act of vandalism of Maggie Thatcher's statue.
Well, Darren, many thanks for having me on the show today. And yes, without a doubt, this act of vandalism against Margaret Thatcher's statue in Grantham is an absolute disgrace. It shows how petty-minded, of course, the socialist left are, attacking a statue of a truly great leader who liberated Britain, of course, from the tyranny of socialism. She won 3 general elections in a row. She restored British greatness on the world stage. And so to have, these petty-minded, lefties hurling eggs and so on, it's an absolute abomination. But it does demonstrate, really, the narrow-mindedness, the intolerance of the left here, who cannot accept, the magnificent achievements of Margaret Thatcher. And the British people, I think, owe, Lady Thatcher an immense debt for everything that she achieved on behalf of the British nation, but also the free world owes Margaret Thatcher an immense debt. And my former boss, I think, was an absolute titan on the British and international stages. We should revere her memory. She was someone who lived her entire life for her country, for the British people, and for the sake of the principles of freedom and liberty.
Yeah, we're just, for radio listeners, we're just playing pictures of Mrs. Thatcher's first election victory there. But now, why does her memory then, of course, as you say, 3 election victories, one of the most, definitely, I think, as far as the post-war is concerned, at least, the most influential prime ministers in living memory. Why does that memory, though, including this statue, provoke seemingly unparalleled anger on the left of British politics?
It's a good question. So many decades after Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, you still have this venom and hatred, from the left. Well, I suspect it's because the left lost, the socialists lost, conservatism won. the principles of liberty, freedom prevailed over the tyrannical ideas of the left. So there's a lot of resentment from the left. And also, of course, Margaret Thatcher played a pivotal role as well, actually, in the development of Brexit. In fact, her 2002 book, Statecraft, was the genesis of Brexit, where she called for the UK to renegotiate its relationship with the European Union. If it didn't get what it wanted, she said Britain had to leave. That's exactly what happened. And so you have also, the Brexit factor as well. And the reality is that, Conservatives prevailed over, a very dark period in British history when Labour ran the country in the 1970s. Britain was the sick man of Europe. Margaret Thatcher restored Britain as a self-confident, a truly great nation on the world stage, and she defeated the scourge of the far left, who were destroying Britain as we knew it. Actually, Britain was a declining nation when Margaret Thatcher took over as Prime Minister, and she restored the great in Britain, and she restored the self-confidence of a nation that today, I think is an infinitely stronger country as a result of Margaret Thatcher's leadership.
Right, now, so what would she have made? You mentioned the Euroscepticism there that ran through the later years, certainly, of Margaret Thatcher's premiership. What do you think she would have made? And I think it's safe to say that we're of the view that Mrs Thatcher was a staunch unionist as well, right? So look at what she did in Northern Ireland very, very robustly. What would she have made of this Irish Sea border that's being created by the Northern Ireland Protocol?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is a big issue right now on both sides of the Atlantic. And, Margaret Thatcher would have fully supported, I think, the efforts taken right now, actually, by the British government to amend the Northern Ireland Protocol. It isn't working. It's a deal that was actually a protocol that was forced on the British people by the European Union as part of the deal to get out of the EU. This is a very bad deal for the United Kingdom. It's a terribly bad deal, I think, for the wonderful people of Northern Ireland, who are, in effect, discriminated against as a result of the protocol. The protocol is hugely flawed, and the European Union is trying to defend the indefensible. And I think the Boris Johnson government is 100% right to try and address what is going on, to change the protocol, to take unilateral action with regard to the protocol, because the EU is not negotiating in good faith. The EU is behaving with incredible arrogance here. And Margaret Thatcher would have strongly stood up to the European Union over this, and she would have told the EU it has no business dividing the United Kingdom, and Northern Ireland basically is split off from the rest of the UK in terms of being forced to be part of the EU single market. It's discriminated against. This is unacceptable. It's also unacceptable, frankly, for Nancy Pelosi, the US Speaker of the House of Representatives, to be lecturing Britain on this issue. That's an absolute disgrace. She needs to mind her own business and keep out of this.
Well, that was going to be my next question, actually. So well done you for being able to get your crystal ball out and get there before I asked it. But the American administration, as you've just mentioned there, they've taken actually quite a hard line against any unilateral action by the British side. You could say actually criticising the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. And actually, I say to an American audience that may well be watching you today, Niall, I would say, look, it's like a US state, right? One of the states of the United States of America being beholden, cut off from the rest of the US. And it's Canadian courts and Canadian legislators that make the decisions that happen to this particular US state. That would be seen as completely unjustifiable to an American audience. Why did the American administration, the Democratic Party, not seem to understand why we view that as objectionable?
Well, you've made tremendous points there, Darren, because this is an issue really of British sovereignty and self-determination. You have a very left-wing US administration. The Biden presidency is a left-wing government. It is also surrounded by its allies in Congress, the Democrats, of course, who are anti-Brexit. And so this is feeding through here. And I think, the lecturing, the hectoring coming from Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, but also from the Biden White House is completely, unacceptable. This is a matter for the British people to decide. It's not the business of the United States to be interfering on this matter. And, Nancy Pelosi's, I think, astonishingly rude, arrogant and appalling attacks on the British government here, and all the threats that she's making to derail a US-UK trade deal. This is completely out of order. There is very strong opposition, of course, to this among US conservatives. Many members of Congress, Republicans, are strongly opposed to the Democratic position. They want to see a US-UK trade deal. They do not support in any way the appalling language being sent from the Biden White House or from Nancy Pelosi. And we should also bear in mind, of course, there are midterm elections in November in the United States. The polling shows that there's likely to be a conservative revolution. And Nancy Pelosi is highly unlikely to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives post January, following the midterm election. So it's a lot of hot air, frankly, coming from the American left. They're anti-Brexit. They don't like Brexit. They parrot the talking points of the European Commission. And Nancy Pelosi really needs to mind her own business and stop telling the British what to do.
Well, hey, I tell you what, if Nancy Pelosi is out as Speaker of the House, all I can say is, why does the United States of America, with a population over, 300 million people, keep going for people that are 80 years old? It's just absolutely bizarre to me. But anyway, Niall Gardner, Director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation, thank you for your thoughts. Now, folks,
my pleasure. Thanks
it's time for our Scrap Reform Keep segment. And today, we're looking at Britain's primary de-radicalisation scheme, Prevent. Now, that programme aims to deter would-be terrorists from committing acts of terrorism. It's long been unpopular with left-wing campaigners. The National Union of Students, we're speaking about them quite a lot today, and some teacher unions and a number of Labour MPs have claimed that it's actually Islamophobic. In recent years, however, it's been increasingly focused on so-called far-right extremism. But is this justified and relative to the size of the actual threat that's posed to the UK? An independent review of Prevent by Sir William Shawcross, a former chairman of the Charity Commission, claims actually that the programme is too focused on right-wing extremism and has double standards. So is it time for Prevent to be less politically correct and double down on the Islamist threat? Well, joining me now is Sir Peter Fahey, the former police lead for Prevent and former Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. Hiya, Peter. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Peter, can I ask you, do you actually think then that ultimately Prevent has been politicised a little bit too much?
No, not by the police. I don't think the way it operates day to day, it's in any way politicised. This is essentially about what is a prevention programme. The important thing is that Prevent is a voluntary programme. If you're talking about people that are a serious threat, then clearly what you need to use is enforcement action, intelligence gathering, action, surveillance. Prevent was always about, can you identify people at an early stage in their career who have extremist thoughts and views, and who might go on to move that into violence. And the really important thing is this is not about policing thought. And the trouble is, because of exactly some of the debates that you've talked about some of the debates about foreign affairs and foreign policies and things like the Iraq war, then unfortunately Prevent has, been criticised in many, many places. There's been obviously, opposition from all sorts of groups, but in its, in reality, all Prevent is a similar programme to, for instance, the one that identifies young lads that might be drawn into gangs, people that may get drawn into drug dealing, and even people who perhaps, are young people who are, at danger of being excluded and kicked out of school. That's essentially what it is. It's a prevention programme. You're absolutely right. The difficulty is it has been, in a way politicised. That has unfortunately, damaged its impact. Some people have decided not to, work with it and cooperate with it, which is a great shame. And the important thing for the police and everybody involved is that Prevent concentrates on what is the greatest threat, harm and risk. So it doesn't really matter what is the ideology. What is important is this individual likely to turn their ideology into violent action, and can anything be done to try and prevent that?
Yeah, I accept that, right? We all accept and understand now what Prevent is there to do. But ultimately, though, when you've got someone like Sir William Shawcross, right, former chairman of the Charity Commission, this isn't someone in the, I don't know, English Defence League saying that the Prevent programme is actually focusing on the wrong priorities and the size of the threat there that we identified at the top of this discussion. When you've got someone like that saying that this programme perhaps isn't focusing on the issues that the UK is really facing most vehemently, surely that means it's crying out, Peter, for reform.
No, well, you see, I think he starts from, exactly the wrong point. Prevent is not about an ideology. It's about what is the threat. And really, it doesn't really matter. And what you've seen in recent attacks and what the police are well used to is that you get extreme, very violent, often disturbed individuals who will do a very violent act and sometimes will claim it's because of a particular ideology. And often, it's nonsense. It is about this is a disturbed person. And so the key thing the police have always worked with is every single day looking at where is the risk coming from. And it doesn't matter, as I say, whether that is overseas or at home, or whether it's so-called right-wing or it's left-wing, whether it's animal rights, whether it's Islamists, whatever it might be. That isn't the issue. The issue is this person likely to, take that into violent action? And so the police don't look at right-wing as a whole and say, this is a threat to Britain or Islamic as a whole. They look at, which are the key organisations like Al-Qaeda and others that are fostering this? Who are the individuals that they're trying to influence? Who are the people in the past, for instance, that were in mosques that were trying to radicalise young people and encourage them to go out to Syria and fight there? And that clearly was a focus at that particular time. And now, the intelligence services and the police are largely looking at individuals who are radicalised online. And as I say, it doesn't really matter where the ideology is coming from. The critical issue is that there are often parents, there are teachers, there are youth workers, there are people in the community, whoever it might be, that see those warning signs and then refer it and raise those concerns. And a decision can be made as to whether that person is suitable for going into the Prevent programme.
Ari, the former police lead for Prevent and former Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police explaining that issue of the Prevent programme to us. Thank you very much for your time today. Now, folks, the first harvest of the farming year is underway in Northern Ireland. With the expected grain shortage, animal feed is expected to hit record prices. We're all going to be skint. So the crop of grass known as silage will be crucial for the winter feed. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, has more.
Our country lanes may look tranquil, an ideal place for leisure. But in truth, they're on the factory floor of our food production. Heavy machinery is already gathering the first of this year's crops. And with rising energy costs and changes in subsidies, what happens in farms over the next short while will dictate how our economy will perform. This harvest is vital for the agri-food sector. It is the harvest of the food of our food, the ingredients of our ingredients. It is the primary building blocks of our economy, and this will decide the price of our food within the next 12 months.
It's basically grass, so it is, but and it's the feed for the cattle for the winter. So we need to make as good a silage as we can for the winter for our cattle to be able to produce milk, beef, or whatever type of farming you're in that you're using grass, silage.
Adam George is a fifth-generation farmer and explains how the second crop will be more costly.
Once you get the first cut off, you have to put fertiliser onto it and slurry. The fertiliser has more than trebled in prices from what it was this time last year. So it's going to make the likes of our second cut silage very expensive.
In these times where basics like energy and the price of food hold the balance of our budgets, what else can be done to alleviate pressures on our farms?
I think they need to look at the legislation. There's a lot of red tape in place that we have to adhere to that ties our hands. The likes of how much fertiliser we can sow, when we can spread our slurry, how many cattle we can keep for the amount of ground we have. All that legislation's in place. We have to adhere to it. and it restricts us.
Food security is now at the top of every government's list. Predictions of apocalyptic pricing and food availability must prompt action to help farms produce more of our own food. Doogie Beattie, GB News, County Down.
Well, quite alarming stuff there from that County Down report, which is suggesting, folks, that we are ultimately all going to end up pretty skinned. Let's hope that the government puts some action in place pretty soon. But folks, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. The show's on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. But for now, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and it's looking cloudy and damp in the northwest, but some evening sunshine further southeast. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England looks to be largely dry this evening with some cloud cover, but a bit of sunshine here and there. Temperatures in Plymouth around 15 Celsius. More bright or sunny spells across London and southeast England this evening, and still quite warm at 7 p.m. A few showers across mid and west Wales this evening, but generally a dry picture here with the best of any sunshine towards Cardiff and Newport. It's largely a dry picture for the Midlands too. That said, there will be a good deal of cloud around, but temperatures still between 18 and 16 degrees. Much of northeast England and Yorkshire should also be dry, with the best of any sunshine towards the east coast. A few splashes of rain is possible over the Pennines. It's generally cloudier skies to be expected over Scotland, with occasional light rain across the south of the country.